Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Kalayim, Pedig Tes Halacha Gimel. We are in middle of the Agadata, beginning with the story of Hashkafta the Rebbe, and in continuing with the story of the passing of Rabbi Chia, or as he's referred to here in the Yerushalmi, Rabbi Chia Ruba. We're going to be learning today Daf Pei Aleph. We left off on Daf Pei Amid Beis, 8 lines from the top of the Amid. We have some catching up to do. Now, the Gemara here, very similar to what we have in Ksubas, in Bavli, the Gemara is going to speak about Kama Gedolim, Masei, Chia. We're going to speak about Amoriroyim that very much wanted to see Rabbi Chia after his passing. We're going to learn about the story of the burial of Rab Huna. And mamish, same thing we had in the Bavli and Ksubas Daf Kuf Gimel Kuf Daled, how Rav Huna was buried in the general crypt of Rabbi Chia and his sons Yehuda and Chizkiah. And from there, we're going to speak about the greatness of being buried in Eretz Yisrael, even if a person lived in Chutz La'aretz, of passing away in Eretz Yisrael, plus being buried in Eretz Yisrael. We're going to learn from there. We're going to go into Tchias HaMesim. Al Tchias HaMesim will certainly start in Eretz Yisrael. How all who are buried in Eretz Yisrael will get up for the Tchias HaMesim. We're going to learn how people that are buried b'chutz la'aretz, if they will merit, how will they make their ways to Eretz Yisrael to get up from Eretz Yisrael. And finally, the special Hashgacha Pratis regard to the exact place where a person should pass away. And we're going to quote, as much as time will permit, similar or the same stories that we find in Sukkah Daf Nun Gimel, and how it's written again different here in the Yerushalmi. We're going to learn, if we'll get there, to the passing of Rabbi Meir, the great Rabbi Meir Balanes, that we all know is buried in Tveria Ir HaKodesh. He passed away in Asia, and now his beer miraculously came to the Holy Land and much more. And let's jump right into it. Daf Pei Amid Beis, again at the end of the 8th line from the top of the Amid. We're beginning here with what happened after Rabbi Chia passed away, and how various Amoroyim wanted to merit to see him. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yosi, some Tamya Yoimin, he fasted 80 days, that's 80 days. To have the merit to see Rabbi Chia the Great, and it worked. Now, when he saw Rabbi Chia, that experience was so overwhelming for his body that it caused his hands to shake, and it caused his eyes to be dimmed because of the lightness, the greatness, the oir that was coming out of Rabbi Chia. And you have all these stories that we have in Hasidic tradition, how one tzaddik merited to see his Rebbe after the Rebbe's physical passing. I know that there was someone who asked the Alter Rebbe, when was it the first time that he saw the Maggid and the Baal Shem Tov while the Alter Rebbe was awake? Seeing in his dream is much easier. And the Alter Rebbe shared that he saw the Maggid and the Baal Shem Tov while he was in jail. That culminated with his freedom, his emancipation on Yutas Kislev, that the Maggid and the Baal Shem Tov came to visit him while the Alter Rebbe was awake. That's probably what we're talking about over here. Now, says the Gemara, Rabbi Yosi managed to see him, merited to see him, but Rabbi Yosi was overwhelmed. So the In Taimar, says the Yerushalmi, if you would think, Tahava Rabbi Yosi Barnash Zeir, that he was a small person, Beruchnius, which was why he was overwhelmed by him seeing Rabbi Chia after his passing. No, Rabbi Yosi was no small person at all. And how do I know that? Chad, because the Gemara says, Chad Gardai was a certain weaver. He came to Rabbi Yechanan Amalei, and he told him that Chamis Bechalmi, I saw in my dream that that the sky was falling. However, but one of your students, somehow managed to keep the heavens from completely collapsing. One of your Talmidim supported the heavens. And Rabbi Yechanan understood that this dream is a significant dream. And it's like almost literally that someone who's in one of his students have a merit to hold up the skies, so to say. So Amalei Rabbi Yechanan asked this Gardai, this weaver, the Chachim Atle, do you know him? Amalei. So he told Rabbi Yechanan that if I would see him, I'll recognize him. Okay, and Rabbi Yechanan wanted to know who was that Talmud. So Avar called Talmidoi Kumei. So he passed, Rabbi Yechanan passed all of his students in front of this weaver, and V'chacham le Rabbi Yosi. Rabbi Yosi was the one. So you see Rabbi Yosi in his chus, whatever it means, the heavens were held up, and Rabbi Yosi saw Rabbi Chia. And nevertheless, it had a very strong effect on his body. Again, his hands were shaking and his eyes were dimmed. Now, another Ramayda. Our famous
Is that the same Rabbi Yossi, the teacher of Ishmael, Rabbi Ishmael?
No, this must an Amoida.
Oh,
For sure, because Rabbi Chia was already in that bridge era. And now the next Amoida, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Tzom Tlas Mavan Soimen. He fasted not 80. He fasted for 300 fast days in order to merit to see Rabbi Chia, but it didn't work for Rabbi Shlokish. He couldn't see him, and therefore Uba Seifa Shiram Mitzvah. He was in a lot of distress. He was in pain, and he didn't understand why did he not even merit to see him. And he says, "Ma, ano loyi boy raisa sagin minei." Did Rabbi Chia toil that much more than I in Torah studying? In other words, his chos was Torah. I also have that. So Amr and Lay, whether they told him here on the earth or whether other people told the Reish Lakish, that Ribeit's Torah be Yisrael Yoser Memcha. It's not about the learning, but he disseminated. He taught Torah more than you. And not only that, Elo have a gole that he went into exile for the sake of teaching Torah. Amar Loy Reish Lakish responded, V'loy Haveno gole, that I not go into exile? So Amr and Lay, they told Reish Lakish, here's the difference. That you, Reish Lakish, went into exile to find a teacher, to learn Torah. Avesa Gali Melaf. But for who? But Rabbi Chia Ruba, he went into exile to teach. Havi Gali Malafa, he went to teach Torah. And I know that this story is written twice in the Bible, in Bava Metzia and in Ksubas, but since we're learning the sugya here in Yerushalmi, that's corresponding to what we have in Bavli Ksubas. So on Ksubas, Daf, Kuv Gimel Amid Beis, quickly to read how Rabbi Chia, how he went into Golos to be a Marbet Stoira. Now, the story in Bava Metzia is more elaborate, but let me just read it here from Ksubas. That Rabbi Chia asuk b'mitzvah sava. And the big difference was Rabbi sat and learned, and Rabbi Chia, like I mentioned, Rabbi Chia was like Yosef Atzadik. Rabbi Chia was a merchant. Rabbi Chia learned, and he worked, and the most important, he was asuk b'mitzvahs. And what was that? So the Gemara begins telling us a story that the Chihavi minsu Rab Chanina, Rab Chanina and Rab Chia got into an argument in Torah. Amalei Rab Chanina, Rab Chia. Rab Chanina tells Rab Chia, "Bahadidi means that you're fighting with me, you're disagreeing with me. Do you know how great I am?" And Rab Chanina says, "The ichas v'shalom nishtak Torah mi Yisrael. If Yidden would forget the Torah, mahadarno lemi pilpuli." My koyach of pilpul, Rab Chanina, was so much superior to Reish Lakish and to everyone else that I'll resuscitate. I'll bring back the Torah from my pilpul if it would be forgotten. So Amalei Rabbi Chia told him, you're right, but I have something up one over you. Ano Avdi, what I did was to make sure I made sure it should not be forgotten. What's the chachma? It should be forgotten and you should bring it back. And what did he do? That the asaina kitana, that he used to take flax, coming back to our kalayim sugya, and vishadaina, and he planted it. He planted the flax. Umegadalna, and he grew and he harvested the flax, and he made out of it nishbei. He made out of it nets, and vitzaydona tavyan, and he would trap deer. He did all that. Umachilna bisra liyasmi, and he gave the meat to the Yisraelim. Varichna migilasa mimishchida tavya, and then he would make out of the hide of the deers. He would make megillas. He would make, and what would he do with that? He would write on it, as we'll see, the Torah, Chamisha Chumshe Torah. And Visalikna Lamasa, and he went to cities, the Leisba, Mikri Dardake. He went to cities where you have no school teachers. Because Ivnan, he wrote down Chamisha Chumshe. He wrote 5 different Svarim, not all in together, to give it to 5 different Yanukim. And then Umas Nisa Mishnayis, Shita Sidrei L'Shita Yanuki. He taught the 6 Adarim to six older students from Mishnayos. And to each one, he told them, whatever you know, teach to your fellow. And that's what Rab Chia did to make sure that Torah should not be forgotten. And for that, the Gemara says, Kama Gedoyla Maaseh Rab Chia. So he was the ultimate Marbitz Torah. He taught Torah to children, to Dardiki, Chumash, and Mishnayos. Now let's go weiter. After Rab Chia passed away, and the Gemara is just skipping over, and like we mentioned yesterday, that Rab Chia had two children, Yehuda and Chizkiah. And Rab Chia and Yehuda and Chizkiah, as we learned in the Bavli, if they daven together, their tefillah always came to fruition. That's how great they were. The Gemara says that Rab Chia and his students and his sons were like Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. That's how great they were. Now, Rav Huna, and let me tell you, the Rav Huna that we learned yesterday is not this Rav Huna. The Rav Huna that we learned yesterday, he was, right, what did Rab Chia say? I would put him on a Rebbe. Rebbe would put him on a seat greater than him. He was from the older generation. Don't forget, Rab Chia was younger. This Rav Huna was even younger. He passed away after Rab Chia. And he was also the Reish Galus in Bavel. And as we will learn further today, the great merit, even if one does not live in the Holy Land, to be buried in Eretz Yisrael. So when he passed away, Askunei Lahacha, they brought him to Eretz Yisrael to be buried. And Amrin, people said, On Anon Yahavin Onlei, where should we bury him? So Amrin and other people responded, Rav Huna, he merits to be buried together with Rab Chia. Is Naitina Gabe Rab Chia Ruba. Why? Why should he be buried there? Because the who min did hoin, because Rav Huna is from him. Now, the pshat could be that he was from the same family, but it's a lot more than just being from the same family. In other words, the type of quality, the level that Rab Chia and his sons attained, they decided Rav Huna was of that caliber. So Amrin, however, even though they all decided that Rav Huna merits to be buried together with Rab Chia, they asked, Man boy may have lay. Who will bring him there? Because to bring him there, Rab Chia was buried in a crypt. You're entering the crypt. Who would dare enter to bring Rav Huna? So Amar Rab Chaya says, Ano olul yohavlei, I'll put him in there. He volunteered. And right away he was criticized. So Amrulay, they told him that Ilsachat, boy, you're looking for a pretext. You know why you want to go there? I know why you want to go there. You don't want to go there to bury Rav Huna and a big Mesiras Nefesh. Actually, Da'at Gvar Sav, you are an old person. You feel that your time came. You're hoping that when you enter in there, you'll pass away in the crypt, and then you will be buried there. The whole thing is Shaloi Lishma. That's what they told him. Da'at boy male mesav lon tamon. You want to put yourself there. So Amar Loin, to which Rab Chagai responded that I'm doing it l'shem shamayim. I want to bury Rav Huna there. And if you think that I'm planning to pass away there, okay, let me say I'll go in there. And maybe because of the Kedusha, I'll pass away over there. But I don't merit to be buried there. He told him, Yahavoin mishechasa biraglai, tie a rope to my legs. And ve'in anyas. And if I tarry, that means if I'll be there for a long time and not go out, is atun garshin. You will divorce me from that location. You'll schlep me out. So I'm showing you that I will not be there. I'm going there only to put Rav Huna there. And indeed, so they allowed him to take Rav Huna into the crypt of Rab Chia and his students and his sons. And all, when he went up there, Beruchnias, Va'ashkach Talas Donin, he found three. Now, these three were not necessarily Rab Chia and his sons. He found three, or could be they were. Three were sitting in judgment. And the verdict of the judgment, it was not them. What was the verdict? That Yehuda b'ni acharecha ve'enoi. Yehuda, my son, doesn't mean that Rab Chia was saying it. But my son meant that everyone in the heavens acknowledged that the center of that crypt was Rab Chia. And whoever else is there is an addendum to Rab Chia. Yehuda, my son, is allowed to be here, but no one else. Before we turn the page, look inside the Marav Fulda, the last Marav Fulda in the Amid. Matzah Shleisham Shadanu Kach Yehuda b'ni acharecha ve'enoid. Now, why b'ni? V'amar b'ni, again, that he also understood, it's not that Rab Chia was paskening. V'amar b'ni mepnei kevoide shel Rab Chia. Since Rab Chia had two sons, Yehuda and Chizkiah, u'ke'ilu heim nami roi l'shabeach l'shvach hazeh acharecha ve'einoid, Koloimer, the main judgment was that Rab Chia and his sons passed away. No one was like them in Chasidus, and no one was like them in good deeds. They were unique. They were shoulders above everyone else. And now today's daf Pei Aleph. And finally, the statement was made that Acharecha Yosef ben Yisrael ve'einoid. They referred in the heavens to Rab Chia Ruba. They called him Yosef ben Yisrael. That's Yosef HaTzadik. That's Yosef the Shevet, the son of Yaakov Avinu. And like we mentioned before, because just like Yosef HaTzadik was the viscery, he was involved in the world and he remained a tzaddik. That was the uniqueness of Rab Chia. So before we spoke about the uniqueness that he was Marbet Stoira, the correlation to Yosef HaTzadik is that he was a man of business. And while he was in that position, he was the great Rab Chia. Many other Tanoim also worked in Amoraim, but not on that level. Like many of them, they worked for 40 years and then they taught for 40 years. Separate. He at the same time. Anyways, Rab Chagai is hearing how they're making an announcement that no one else is allowed to be here. And he wanted to see who were those judges. So Tolos Einoi Mistaklo, he lifted up his eyes to look at them. And he heard Is Amarle, he heard a voice telling him, "Oh, apech means lower your face or lower your eyes." As we just began today, learning that when Rabbi Yossi merited to see Rab Chia, it overwhelmed him. It would have overwhelmed him to see these judges. And Shema Kolei the Rab Chia Rabbah. And then he heard now, not the judges. So now he heard the voice of Rab Chia Rabbah telling to Yehuda, his son, that what? That Napish le Rav Huna Yosef le, make room for Rav Huna. In the Babli, we're going to read a little bit. There's more details. That actually, that one was to the right of Rav Chia, and one of his sons was to his left. And Rav Chia wanted for Rav Huna to be buried next to him. So we told Yehuda, you move to make room for him to come. But Rav Huna says, no. These are all people that are not living. Verstehst? But Rav Huna did not accept. Rav Huna told Rav Huna, you don't move. Amar, when Rav Chia saw that Rav Huna was allowing his son to be where he was without moving, so he gave him a bracha. So Amari told him, just like you accepted upon yourself for my son not to move, I was going to give you that spot. You told my son to stay in his place, so your children will stay in their place. What does that mean? Your children will never cease. Gave him a bracha for his descendants to go on forever. And it doesn't just mean biologically, it means beruchnius. And after all of that, the Yatza Misham Rab Chagai survived all of that. So he brought Rav Huna in. He heard the psak din of the Dayanim. He saw the conversation of Rab Chia with his son. He heard the bracha that Rab Chia gave him, and he walked out. And you know what happened? They thought that he was an old man. He's about to pass away. So V'hoya ben Shmoinim Shana, Rab Chagai at that time was 80 years old. You know what happened to him? God gave him another 80 years. Rab Chagai lived 160 years. Now, I just want to read this again in Bavli in Moed Katan. That's where the story is recorded. Moed Katan Daf Chav Hey. So all of the eulogies are written over there. And on Amud Aleph, it's a lengthy story in the Bavli. First, how they brought Rav Huna from Bavel. And then how finally they brought him into the crypt. And what the Gemara writes in the Bavli is a little bit another detail. It's different. It's not the same story differently. It's a different part of the story. That when he walked in over there, he saw a amuda de noira chazir. He saw a pillar of fire. And now, what happened in the pillar of fire? This conversation that the Yerushalmi wrote, they understood that. The Bavli records he saw a pillar of fire, and what he did was he understood that people are not meant to be there. He did not want to take Rav Huna out. You see over here, Rav Huna was invited in. but he felt that he cannot put Rav Huna the way normally you bury a person. So what he did was, the Gemara says that Bahai Deloyi Anish Anish Rab Chagai was not punished for bringing Rav Huna in there, Mishum de Zakfei la Aroine de Rav Huna, because he placed Rav Huna's Aron standing up. That detail you don't have over here. So we learned 2 days ago of being buried on the side. So when Mashiach comes, he should be ready to go. Here, Rav Huna was buried standing up. Maybe there wasn't enough room in there, or maybe he felt Rab Chagai that the caliber of Rab Chia and his sons are so superior that no one should be here. On the other hand, Rav Huna should be here. So
Rabbi, how did he carry him at 80 years old inside the crypt alone?
The best I can give you is that we have a tradition that when the Maggid passed away, the Talmidim made a goydel who should have the merit taking him to a mikvah. And by the way, even though nowadays the normal halach yelech is that people before they are buried, the tara does not consist of a mikvah anymore. The tara is that they throw tisha kabin, but still by certain tzaddikim they bring him into the mikvah. And the Alter Rebbe won. If you're cold, we can shut the air or shut the fan. The Alter Rebbe won to hold the head of the Maggid. So the other Talmidim brought him into the mikvah. When it came to the head, they brought him feet first. The Maggid the Alter Rebbe told the Maggid that tzaddikim, when they're not living, are called living. And he told the Maggid, you toivel yourself. Tzaddikim b'misasim kurim chaim. And the Maggid dunked his head under the water, whatever the minig is for deceased people to go under the mikvah. So I would say that he told his son to move. How would that work? If Yehuda, who passed away many years earlier, would have been able to move, and if they can have a conversation, so Rab Chagai can carry him. Fits the story, Kate.
No, got it.
Okay, right. Now, so what did we learn? That Rav Huna was brought to be buried, yeah? I think, okay, whatever you want.
Right, just to clarify, we're understanding this story that the Rav Huna Reish Chalusa is the Rav Huna who took over from Rav in Surah?
Probably. I just want you to,
like, right?
That's what it seems. I'll tell you something else, that there was, who was in between Rav and Rav Huna? Rav Nuna Sava. And Rav Nuna Sava was very hesitant. Let me say this, Danny, that for sure, yeah, you said good. Because the Rav Huna that we learned about yesterday lived in the times of Rabbi. It's a different Rav Huna. So very good. Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav. Exactly. Rav passed away, and Rav Hamnuna Sava, Rav Hamnun Alpi Kabbalah is like Alma Deskasya. He was very hesitant in taking over the position. He was there for a very small amount of time. The great successor. So I remember I learned once that Rav Huna was the successor. Then I learned Rav Hamnuna was. I heard this from one of my teachers that Rav Hamnuna took over for a very short amount of time, and then Rav Huna took over.
It's interesting. There's this connection between Rav Huna and Rav Chia, as opposed to maybe Rav, who was
because very good, because Rav was also the student of Rab Chia. Exactly, that's what we learned yesterday. Now everything fits. In other words, they shared the same Rebbe. Just that Rav Huna was much younger. Very good. Okay, now a whole topic about being buried in the Holy Land. Now we are beginning with Yaakov Avinu, and we're quoting a pasuk that we have in Parshas Vayechi. Ksiv says that Yaakov Avinu instructed Yosef unasasani mi Mitzrayim. So that's one thing. Now we know that leaving Egypt, he didn't want to be buried in the earth that will turn into Kinim. He didn't want him to be worshipped as an Avodah Zarah. Those reasons that we are familiar with only explains why Yaakov did not want to be buried in Egypt. But that did not explain why did he want to be buried ukfartani bikfurasam. And it was evidently not such a simple thing to take him all the way to Hebron. Why did he want to? Yaakov, and the way the Gemara asks the question, we beautifully, Yaakov kol hondahu. Yaakov is Yaakov wherever Yaakov is. Your greatness does not come from your location. No, a great person creates a location. Certain people are not great, but you make a place for them. So when they sit in the chair, ooh, grace. But really, you create your Yaakov is Yaakov. So Manu Minche, what was he lacking? Why did he need to be buried in the Holy Land? And you have Shvi Amayroim, and they all answered it cryptically. Rabbi Lazar says, Devarim Bigav, there's something hidden here. They didn't say what. They revealed. The answer is about that which is hidden. We'll see what that means. And Rab Chanina said the same words, Devarim Bigav, there's something hidden here. Rabbi Shua ben Levi Yomar, Devarim Bigav. So Vishkoyach. So the Yerushalmi compiled all these three answers given from three different people. And now what do they mean by that? Frag the Gemara, Mal, Dvarim Begav, so Rav Shimon Lakish Amar. I'll tell you what Dvarim Begav means. You know what the hidden thing? The hidden thing, Tchias HaMesim is the most hidden of everything. And how it's going to work. It's about the hidden. It's about Tchias HaMesim. And beginning with Akasha, that in Tehillim, Kapitel Kufta Zayin, it's not divided the way it's divided in by Hallow. Right? Kufta Zayin has in it both stanzas. So in there you have the words Hisalech Lifnei Hashem Ba'artzois HaChayim. And first of all, the end of this kapitel is Bechatzres Beis Hashem V'Sirchechi Yerushalayim Halaluka. So because of the same kapitel ending about what's happening Bechatzres Beis Hashem Yerushalayim, that is Megala that Ba'artzois HaChayim is referring to the land of Israel. And the Gemara begins by asking that the pshat, the simplest pshat of Ba'artzois HaChayim is when you're living in a living place. What's a living place? A little dorf, a little village is a dead place. Like Lahavdil, LA compared to New York is dead. No, that's it. 8 o'clock, myself included, everyone is in bed. New York, the city that never sleeps. The Gemara is beginning with the premise that the Ba'artzois HaChayim, the pshat would mean in a metropolitan, in a city where things are happening. So V'haloi Artzois HaChayim, we know from this kapitel Yerushalayim that it's referring to the Holy Land. But why? Artzois HaChayim should be any place. V'haloi ein Artzois HaChayim elatzur v'chavrei sel. L'choira Artzois HaChayim is about a big city or Kesarin v'chavrei sel. Now, why is it called a living place? Either because people are awake at night, or maybe it's because in large cities everything that you need is available. That's the pshat. You can live because any service that you need is there. However, Taman, why Taman Zoila, Taman Soiva? In large cities, things are inexpensive. You can live because there's competition. You're not the only guy selling it. And over there, you get satisfied. Everything you need is there. Food is there. That's how it worked. Today you have transportation. So why is the Holy Land called the life of the living when any large city should be called Artzois HaChayim? And the answer is, Reb Shimon ben Lakish says in the name of Bar Kapara, why is Eretz Yisrael the land of the living? Eretz shemeiseh hachoyin tchila liyamais HaMashiach. Here again, we're connecting the resurrection with Yamais HaMashiach. Now, and as we'll elaborate in the Gemara, it's not only that the resurrection will begin first from the Holy Land, but we'll see in a moment that everyone buried there is getting up to Tchias HaMesim. Chutz la'aretz, you have to be worthy. Umatam, where do we find the source for that? Quoting a pasuk from Yeshayahu, that Noisen Neshama La'am Aleha, the nation that's on the Holy Land, they will be given back their soul. So, Frek the Gemara Elamayata, are you telling me that that all of the great tzaddikim that passed away in the Golus, Hifsidu, they're not going to be by, let's go with Moshe Rabbeinu was not buried in Eretz Yisrael. Omar Rab Simoi, no. Not only getting up first, the resurrection will happen only there. And they're going to have to travel from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael. The ones who are buried there, that Machlid HaKadosh Baruch Hu Lifnei Mesaretz, God will create tunnels, not Lahavdil, the guy Musk. He invented tunnels. We have the subway system. The guy over here, he made a tunnel in who knows where. In Las Vegas for 2 blocks. It cost us $20 billion. But God is going to make tunnels. And the Misgalgal in Kenoides. And the Mason, their bodies will, look at the expression, they will roll like a noid, like a flask, like a barrel. And the Kivin Shehem Agim Eretz Yisrael, once they reach Eretz Yisrael, Nafshin Chayzres Aleim. I want to speak about Misgalgal and Kenoides. To me, an airplane looks like a noid. It's like a tube. I'll bring back this thought in a moment. Look inside the Pnei Moshe. He just quotes the words that we are more familiar with. It's 13 lines from the bottom, or 14 lines from the bottom of the Amid. That Machalid means Noikiv Lefnei Mesaretz. God makes a tunnel, and that's called a Mechila. I know Mechilois can mean a dance, and Mechilois can mean this circular tunnel in the ground. For Oisalehem Mechilois Tachas HaKarka, the Heim is Galgal in Kenoides Halalu, Ubishvil Kach, Loirotza Yaakov Lehi Kaver Bechutz La'aretz. Now he puts everything together, because the Gemara began to Dvarim Megav, because the resurrection will happen in Eretz Yisrael. Yeah. What about Moshe Rabbeinu? He'll go through these mechilois, he'll go to the Holy Land and he'll come up. So the kasha goes back. So why did Yaakov so much want to be buried in Hebron? Yaakov is Yaakov wherever he is, because he didn't want to go through the tzad of Gilgal mechilois.
We're not going to go on those times. The non-Sadiqim.
No, that's our tradition, that the resurrection will happen exclusively in the Holy Land. And the first place in the Holy Land that the resurrection will begin will be in Har HaZeisim. That we have a tradition.
Before
the Maras, it's going to happen from Har HaZeisim. Question is, no, there will be no more mechilas from here to there. All right, we'll find out. It's going to be.
It said you can bury it all around the world. That I don't mind rolling with them.
There we go. All right.
It's
It's probably safer to be right behind them. It's a good terrain to be on. Now, umatam. Now, where do we have another source? Now we're quoting a pasuk in Yecheskel where it says, in other words, what's the source that even those that are buried b'chutz la'aretz, they're going to only be resurrected in the Holy Land, because it says vehevesi yaschem al admas Yisrael, and then v'nosati ruchi b'chem, and through that v'chiyisem you'll come back to life, and v'hinachti eschem al admaschem, and then I will set you on your soil. So that's the greatness of being buried in the Holy Land. Says the Gemara Vaita, Rabbi Rechia asked Rabbi Chelboi, and the question was not answered, but it was passed up. Rabbi Chelboi asked Rabbi Imi, and Rabbi Imi then asked Rabbi Lazar, and Rabbi Lazar asked Rabbi Chanina, and other people say that Rabbi Chanina himself also needed to ask it up to Rabbi Shua ben Levi. And as we know, again, Ksubas, I think, Dav Ayin Zayin, the greatness of Rabbi Shua ben Levi, from the few people that he went into the next world with his body. And now that you're making a statement, that what? That the people that are buried in Eretz Yisrael, not Rabbi Seinu Shebagoyla, but all the people, everyone will get up. Afilu kigoyin Yeravim ben Nevat v'chaveirav. Will they get up? And the answer is yes. That everyone that's buried in Eretz Yisrael will get up. They were choyto machtes harabim. So the answer is, look at Kevin's picture. I love it. But Kevin, you have to have them rolling. I don't see rolling in your picture. Amalei, and this is a pasuk in the Tzavim. And there was a curse that's articulated that what? That Gofriz v'melach sreifa kol arza. And actually, as we'll see in a moment, that in the beginning of Golus Nebuchadnezzar, that there were fires that burned throughout the Holy Land. And those fires was the din that Hashem was directing towards all those who were buried. So even the Rishonim that were buried in Eretz Yisrael, they got their din by being in this fire. Amar Rabbi Rechia, what does this Gofris v'melech refer to? So Hansha Elohem, and Lo Shaminen Min Klum. So the Gemara says we don't understand the answer. What's the answer? Will Yeravim and Avad get up? So he said, Gofris v'melech sreifa kol arza. What is that answer? So the Gemara says, My Kedoim, you know what the answer is? That Kivin Shenisva Eretz Yisrael, since there was a time that the whole land of Israel burnt, and these Rishonim were already buried there. Nasa b'hem midas hadin, and therefore, yes, the answer is that the Yeravim ben Nevat, the greatest sinners, will get up because they were buried in Israel, and the punishment was already exacted from them. Tani b'shem Rabbi Yehuda, that actually this Gofris v'melech was Sheva Shonim. They were for 7 years Eshes Eretz Yisrael Nesrefes. The Eshes Eretz Yisrael means the mound of Eretz Yisrael. Whether this is something physical, whether this is something ruchnius, I don't know. And Ado D'chsiv, and now he's going to a pasuk in Daniel where it says V'hikbir bris lo rabim shvua echad, that God will impose the terms of the covenant, and we know that the Toichach is called a covenant. That when God punishes us, it's called a covenant. And I'll tell you why. Chassidus explains, because in other relationships there comes a point where you break it. God broke the covenant with the goyim. They misbehaved, he punished them. Meaning they broke the Shabbat mitzvahs. They misbehaved, he destroyed Pompeii. Then there came a point where God told him, goodbye. We have no bond. Do what you want. By the Jewish people, our covenant is such that God will never tell us goodbye. But every now and then, there was punishment to be extracted. That's why the punishment is called a bris. Now, The Gemara is asking that during those 7 years, let's say it happened in the beginning of Galus Nebuchadnezzar, where after Gedalia ben Achikam was murdered, there was a period of time where Yidden did not live there, and there was fires burning in the Holy Land. But we know that other goyim were still living there. So the question is, Kutim Shaba Mehoya Oisim. Yeah, the whole land of Israel was burning with salt and with sulfur. The whole land, and anyone that was buried there went through a punishment because of that. How did people survive living there? So answers the Gemara that Peyala from it base that matliois choyinus refes, patches. Didn't burn in one time. There was a fire here, there was a fire there. So whenever there was no food here, there was food growing over there. This is all ruchnius dikein yanim. Had le'eli fires lahavdil. But the Rishonim here are not getting up with Chias Hameis. If that's a good question, and the answer probably is yeah. If they're meritorious, okay. Back to being buried. Going back from Chias Hameis, I'm going back to being the merit of being buried in the Holy Land. The Gemara is going to quote a pasuk in Yirmiyahu. Yirmiyahu was a Navi that because of his bitter prophecies, there was a lot of opposition, there was a lot of resistance. And there was a Kohen, a Russia, called Pashchur. And Pashchur, he dealt with Yirmiyahu by imprisoning him. So when Yirmiyahu, who was only giving over God's word of what will happen in the future, which were not pleasant things, the pushback was to be imprisoned. So Yirmiyahu prophesied against Pashchur. He told him, Va'ata Pashchur, and V'chol Yoshvei Beisacha. At the end, you guys, Telchu Bashevi, you put me in jail, you're going to go Bashevi. And Ubavel Tavoi, and ultimately you're going to be exiled into Babylonia. Visham Tamus and Visham Tikaver. In other words, there's living outside of Eretz Yisrael, there's dying outside Eretz Yisrael, and there's being buried outside Eretz Yisrael. So in the negative, so in the positive, there is the greatest living in Eretz Yisrael. But if you don't live there, at least to die there, to pass away there, and even if not that, at least to be buried there. So we're going to begin seeing that the place of the passing is also of significance, aside of the place of burial. So says the Gemara, Machloikes, Rav Abba Bar Zemina, Omar, Rab Chelbai, and Rab Chama Bar Chanina said that these two Amirayim, Rab Chelbai and Rab Chama, they had an argument. Chadam, one of them said, Mei Sham v'nikbar Sham. In other words, if a person passed away Chutz La'aretz and was buried in Chutz La'aretz, so there are two negative things that happened, which is why Yirmiyahu gave him both of these curses, that Sham Tamus v'Sham Tikaver, which would imply that it's ideal to die in the Holy Land and to be buried there. However, but the Meisham v'nikbar Sham, then two curses. Meisham v'nikbar Kan. What happens if you die b'chutz la'aretz, but at least you're buried in Israel? Then only yesh b'yodei achas. Then there's only one curse, but you still have the curse of dying b'chutz la'aretz. But v'chadna Amar, the other Ramaita says, no, that if a person is buried in Israel, that removes the curse of dying outside Israel. So yeah, of course, it's better to live in Israel and to die in Israel and to be buried in Israel. But he says that kvura shebekan, that if someone gets buried in the Holy Land, that's mechaper for the fact that they passed away outside Eretz Yisrael. Or let's say if one is buried in the Holy Land, it's deemed as if he passed away in Eretz Yisrael. Yakir, you're not passing away. Don't worry. I can't hear you. I feel bad. It's on mute, even though it doesn't say mute. And Yakir is very frustrated because he went to live in Eretz Yisrael, and here he's learning that stinkers like us, if we get buried there, so that alles is good and fine. Okay, can you try again? I can't hear you. It's unbelievable. This is Vashgacha Pratis. That's not on you. That's on us, Yakir. We're not the meritorious. You're in the Holy Land. Says the Gemara. Technology. That Rabbi Yoina b'shem Rab Chama Bar Chanina. Guys, we have this expression. Don't open that door. We have this expression in Bavli Sukkah Daf Nun Gimel, and I'm going to read a little bit of the story in a moment. But the lashon. Okay, let Yakir try again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I could.
Here in Ktubos it says En dome mi shekoletato lemi she'eino koletato.
That's right. No.
That's what
100%. Yeah, 100%. I also want to point out, look at the Gavaldikai.
Nothing with me dying.
That 100%. that this sugya that we're learning over here. What are we learning here in Kalayim? We're learning about Shkafta the Rebbe, Ksubas Daf Kuf Gimel. The same Agadah that we have over here in Talmud Bavli, they put it all together in Ksubas. The whole sugya in Ksubas Daf Kuf Yud Aleph about passing away in Eretz Yisrael. It's amazing how the Amoraim understood that this belongs together. These topics belong together. Okay, so let's go. And now this story we have in Bavli Sukkah Daf Nun Gimel. And the expression is Rigloi de Barnosha Arvasei, that a person's own feet guarantee to bring the person where they're meant to be. And of course, Mahashem Mitzadi Gever Koinanu, that's the pasuk the Baal Shem Tov said. Mitzade means the footsteps of man. I know that. But here we are saying that there is a unique or a revealed Hashgacha Pratis when it comes to the location of someone's passing. So it's not only that everyone was given Yomim Yutzaru V'lo Echad Behem. That means God destines for a person the numbers, the days, the hours, the minutes of life. And nothing, that's it. B'diuk, it's not just that the length of life is all, even though it doesn't look that way. Many times it looks like there was a tragedy. It shouldn't have happened. It's exact. The place of the passing is b'diuk. And God sees to it that the person's legs brings them to the place in which they have to pass away. That's the expression, that one's feet are his guarantors to bring him to his place of death.
This is a story with Shlomo HaMelech you were
Yeah, we
referring
have
to.
the Shlomo of Shlomo HaMelech here, and I'm going to show you different expressions of Shlomo HaMelech. And there's a big soid that I think I got to. There's something that was hidden that I'm going to be Megalo soid. Grace of Megalo soid. Lemikma say, kol hon duhu misba, to place the person where he's being called by God. It's like when you collect a debt, that's the Lashon. You're being toiveya a debt. When the time is up, God is being toiveya our neshama. And what's the pasuk? A pasuk in Malachim. Ksiv, and it says, you see that whole story, that Achav, the wicked Achav, he needed to pass away in Ramois Gilad. In other words, it wasn't only that his time of death came; he needed to die in that location. And God announced, "Who will help me bring him there?" Who brought him there? Navos. His Navos was murdered by him because he wanted to steal his vineyard. And Navas came to him in a dream, and he convinced him that he should go wage that battle because he'll be successful. That God said, "Vayemen Hashem, mi efates Achav, who will seduce Achav v'ya'al v'yipol b'Ramas Gilad?" Now, why did God have to seduce Achav to go to wage battle in Ramot Gilad? Why, if Achav, the wicked king's time came to die, what, God cannot take his soul when he's in his bed? You see from over here that it's not only the time when one is destined to pass away, but the location. And if he needed to pass away in Ramas Gilad, he was brought to Ramas Gilad. And now you'll see the following story that will illustrate this point. Elichoiref and Achiyah, these are two names of terrain. Now look at this Aramish word. Is kitevatirai. The Shloimoi, they were the two secretaries of Shlomo HaMelech. Let me quickly see in Sukkah, Daf Nun Gimel.
In Sukkah, you're referring to luz.
Luz, and that's my soid. Hold on, it's not called luz here, but I'll speak about luz in a moment. So they're called Bnei Shish Soifrim de Shlomo. Soifrim are scribes. And here again, the Aramish and the Yerushalmi is a Greek and Aramaic, is kitab. You can see it's in these Greek words that have no beginning and no end. Right? A secretary. You see how secretary is written in here? Secretary. No, I mean, see, that's how the language developed. So what happened was like this. There were two secretaries of Malach HaMavos. Now, Shlomo HaMelech's greatness is that he managed to interact with angelic forces. I'm sure that we see them, but we shut it out because we are overwhelmed by it. That's probably what it is. It's probably right in front of our faces. Shlomo HaMelech not only saw them, was not overwhelmed, he conversed with them. He knew exactly the Malach HaMavos. So one day he sees the Malach HaMavos, Mistakel Boin. He saw the Malach HaMavos looking at his two secretaries, and v'chodik b'shinoi, and he was baring his teeth. So that's when the Malach HaMavos was told by God to take someone's life, it looks like he gets excited. Like before you eat a steak, like you open up your mouth and you show your teeth, the Malach HaMavis was showing his teeth. So what happened? So Shlomo HaMelech wanted to protect him. And listen, Yakir, exactly the way you said it. Forget about luz. Listen to the words in the Yerushalmi. Amar Mila, Shlomo HaMelech said a name, a Shem Kodesh, a mystical name of God that somehow bended nature, in order v'yahavoin b'chalola, to place them in the chalola, can mean the outer space. There's no oxygen there. He moved them above the ground. Remember the story we had that David HaMelech, right? David HaMelech, he went to wage war, and he also said Hashem Kodesh. He went flying in the air, with one of Oig's relatives that wanted to take revenge. Not Oig, what's his name? Goliath, Sanhedrin. Okay. Anyways, he said a holy name of God, and he put them somewhere, levitating above the ground. Why did he think so? He thought so because he knew that a person has to die where they're destined to die. That's where they have to pass away. And he decided that no one was destined to die floating in the air, because no one can float in the air. So if he'll place them floating in the air, nothing will happen to them. Perfect. So Azan, the Malach HaMavis went, the Nasbei Mintamen, and he took their lives when they were floating in the Chalola. Means way up in the atmosphere. Not only that, Asa Koim Legachech Lekivli, the Malach HaMavis returned, and he stood opposite Shlomo HaMelech, and he was laughing. He was laughing at him. So Amalei, so Shlomo HaMelech tells the Malach HaMavis, Hahi Shata Havesei Icharoik B'Shinach. Just a moment earlier, you were baring your teeth. He didn't know that he took their lives. Why are you so happy? What changed? Why are you laughing? So Amalei, so the Malach HaMavis tells Shlomo HaMelech like this. Amalei Rachmana, God Almighty told me that the Yinsav le'eli choydev achiyam in chalola. You have to take their life, but you can only take their life if they're suspended somewhere in the atmosphere. They were destined to die in space. So the Malach HaMavis says, I told myself, who is the only person that can move them into space? Only the wise Shlomo HaMelech. So man, Yoav li'ilan lohon, the ishtalchis misvinin, who will place them in that location from where I have to take them? How is it going to happen? The Malach HaMavis tricked Shlomo HaMelech. He showed him that he wants to take the life of these two people. Shlomo HaMelech thought he'll outsmart him. Yeah, for sure, there's a location. No one will dream of a location of the outer space. That's exactly from where he needed to take them. And Hashem put this idea in your mind. Why did he put it in your mind? Don't even feel guilty that you killed him. Begin the abad shlichusi, for me to fulfill my shlichus. Now what happened is that the Shlem Kodesh that Shlomo HaMelech used to project them in outer space, even after they died, they were still floating somewhere. Now you have to bury them. So Azal v'tapol min tamon, Shlomo HaMelech needed to go there to bring them back here to bury them. Now what's the soid? Very good, because in Sukkah, it's a different story. There's a place called Luz. Luz is a place from which no one dies. It's a place where only truth is allowed to be uttered. So what the Gemara calls here the outer space, now we know a little bit about Luz. Luz is not in this world. Luz is in the Chalola, because that's the story over there. And actually, they were told, God told the Malach HaMavis that they're going to die at the gates of Luz before they enter.
Rabbi Times, wow! For years I've been struggling. Where are all these people that are immortal, that basically not supposed to be dying in Luz, supposed to be alive? Where are they?
Now you know, Chalola is in the outer space. Now Chalola means where there's no Gashmi. It's Chalol from Gashmi. Because the Gemara in Sukkah says the same story, and instead of saying that he sent them to Chalola, it says Luz. And we never understood Luz.
Bepetach, b'sharei Luz. He didn't make
Luz. That means the entrance of Luz. But if you see that Luz and the Chalola is Sharei Luz. The empty space is Chalola. That's a big soid. When you put together the Yerushalmi and the Bavli. Thank you. I also was excited yesterday. Said, Okay, now, another story. Today, Baroi, the Rebbe Reuven ben Isteroivilois, the two sons of Rebbe Reuven, both of them were Talmidim of Rabbi HaKadosh. And again, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, similar to Shlomo HaMelech, he was able to see the Malach HaMavos. Chama Malach HaMavos, he saw the Malach HaMavos. Mistakel Bain, he saw the Malach HaMavos looking at them. V'charik b'shinoi, and he's baring his teeth. That's the sign. V'omar. In other words, teeth is like violence. What, Danny? What did we learn, Chavre? That if a person dreams and their teeth fell out. Yeah, so you have bad head. Yeah, so that's
something connected to Mita, no?
Yeah, to someone's children, but it also means that this characteristic gets bettered. You see, the teeth is like, they're a dog that's wild. They're baring the teeth, drooling. So, and the Malach HaMavos is looking at these two Talmidim. So Rebbe says, again, I have a solution. I'm going to save them. Naglin lan lideroima. Guys, Dorim is chesed. Malach HaMavos is pure gevura. Shema hagolus mechaperes. And the Elijah was, send them into exile. And the students went into golus. Didn't help. Ozel v'nasva min tamon. And at the same concept notes, God told the Malach HaMavos, you have to take these two students when they're in the south. Malach HaMavos is thinking, how am I going to move them to the south? So the Malach HaMavos, one of his mediums, is using the greatest tzaddikim. Because the purpose of the tzaddik is to save the people. A non-tzaddik, he'll see the Malach HaMavos grinding his teeth or looking at someone with his teeth. He'll think, no, his time came. A tzaddik will say, no, I'm gonna save them. That's it. From their desire to save comes their death, because they needed to move to the Darim. And let's go weiter with dying in Golus over here. Ula was called Ula Nachoisa, Ula the descender. Just like today, the modern Hebrew is you're making aliyah. Okay, what's the opposite of aliyah? Making yerida. Ula constantly made yerida. What does that mean? It means that Ula, we know this. Ula, we have this in Ksubas also. Ula traveled the whole time from the Holy Land to Bavel, back to the Holy Land, back to Bavel. There are many people that they moved to Israel, they moved back to LA, they moved back to Israel. We know such people. They went back to LA. But the kavanah was, Ula was bringing the Torah of Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz. But they called him Ula the Descender. Yakir put himself on this. You shouldn't see him. Now, what happened was, this is a good story for you. Ula Nechaisa Hava Idmach Taman. So when he was outside, when he was in Bavel, he sensed his time of passing is coming. He's going to pass away. And he was very upset about it. He says, listen, Chevra, I go Chutz La'aretz, I go to Eretz Yisrael. I go to Chutz Yisrael. Why couldn't God decide to take my life when I'm in Eretz Yisrael? As we're learning, the mile of even dying in the Holy Land. So Sherei Bache, he's crying. So Amr and so they told him, Malo Bachi, was weinst du? Why are you crying? What did we also learn today? That even if someone passes away in Chutz La'aretz, if one will be buried in the Holy Land, it's going to be machaper for the fact that they died in Chutz La'aretz. Can you imagine all of the challenge and tribulations that your kid has to live in the Holy Land? Now he hears you can live in LA comfortably. All you need to do is to be buried there and you're good to go. Oh, so Anon, he's thinking that Maskin Lan, La'aretz Yisrael, we will take you there. Am I lying? So Ula was not happy with the fact that they would bury him in the Holy Land. He says, Uma hanoli ano moivad margiloi goy aram misavasa. What benefit is it for me to be buried in the Holy Land when my pearl is going to be removed from me? The pearl is our neshama when I'm in a contaminated land. And he gave a beautiful metaphor. And he says, loidoime hapolta b'chei that when the time of passing comes, you're giving up your soul. You're losing your pearl. You cannot compare someone who has to relinquish his soul while he's being embraced in the arms of his mother. What's the arms of our mother? The motherland, not Vlad's motherland. Vlad's motherland, the Holy Land. You can't compare that. Imagine a person dying while he's being embraced by a woman that's not his. That's how Ula felt with the pain of him passing away. B'chutz la'aretz, there's a big ness of Rav Meir. Rav Meir Balanes did not pass away in the Holy Land, but he passed away near the water. That will be the continuation. And he felt that since Eretz Yisrael is surrounded by 7 seas, so if you have to pass away, Chutz La'aretz, pass away over here by the Santa Monica, because that is as if you passed away in the Holy Land. You're passing away by the water, and then we're going to see the miracle that happened, that his coffin was placed on the sea here in the Pacific, and it went by itself all the way